What's going on, everyone? You're watching RD Motoring, and behind you, in front of me, is a car that I've been looking for a very long time. I am very excited to share with all of you. You probably already saw it in the thumbnail. I really don't need to drag it on anymore, so without further ado, this is my 2008 Chevy Corvette. If any of you have been watching the channel for a long time, you know I'm a big GM guy, and I couldn't be happier to share this with all of you. And like I said, this is a 2008, meaning it does have the LS3. 430 horsepower, 424 pound-feet of torque, 6.2 liter V8, one of the best LS engines out there in my humble opinion. Now this car isn't exactly stock. It does have an air-raid cold air intake, and if we come around to the back, it's got a Corsa Sport axle back exhaust. So why don't we take a listen? So 430 horsepower is crank from the factory. With these mods, I like to say I have 431. And one of the other things that I'm sure you're all curious about that I think is extremely important, yes, this is a manual. Now, I don't think this is common knowledge, but in 2008, the Corvette did switch from the T56 to the TR6060 trans, which is just a little bit beefier. They use it on the C6, Z06, and all that. So this transmission is definitely great for holding power and any future mods that I would want to do to it. I do have a lot of plans and a lot of little ideas that I want to do, but for right now, the majority of it is just going to be cosmetic changes. With every car I own, I like to make a few tweaks to the exterior just to really make it my own, a little bit more personal. And really for this, I mean, 430 horsepower, that's plenty right now. I don't want to get too carried away right away, especially because we're kind of later in the summer months going into fall. Well, we are in fall now. I don't really see a point in throwing a bunch of power at it and just having it sit over the winter. Next, I just want to take you guys out for a little cruise and elaborate more on why I chose this particular Vette over anything else. Well, away we go. So like I said, I've been looking for a Corvette for an extremely long time, about 2.5 years now, honestly. Initially, I was actually looking for a 2002 to 2004 C5 Z06. Now, if you don't know too much about Corvettes, the Z06 came with the LS6 motor. It was about 405 horse, you know, all 6 speeds. They were a fixed roof coupe, but they didn't have a removable target top, and they were pretty much track ready to go from the factory. Now, the problem with trying to find one of those cars was the values of them started to just slowly increase over the last, 2 years, 2.5 years that I've been looking. I really didn't want to spend any more than $25,000 on a 20-year-old car. And when the values started to increase past that point, I started to look at other options to see what I could get for the money. I mean, when I first started looking, you could find them for 22, 23, which is fine. My only problem is I was being a little picky. I really wanted it to be between, 40 and 60,000 miles. Stock, I wanted it completely stock, the stock wheels and everything. If it had an exhaust or something, I was fine, but I didn't want anything where the motor was open, where it had a cam or something else in it. But as time went on, the pickings for those started to decrease, and the values started to increase. And before I knew it, a decent example was going for $28,000, $29,000, $30,000. I mean, the commemorative edition, which is the blue with the silver and red stripes, had like a carbon fiber hood. It was a cool thing, but those are going for like, at least asking price, like $40,000. And in my opinion, that's a little too much for a 20-year-old Corvette. And at the same time, I wanted the Z06 because it was a little bit more track focused. It was a little bit cooler. I thought it would maybe do well on the channel, just a little bit more. One thing that did bug me about the Z06 was that fixed roof. I've always wanted a target top. I've always liked T-tops on the old Camaros and everything. And having a target to me just would have been the coolest thing. And unfortunately, no Z06 had it. And with all those things swirling in my head and with the prices of the C5Zs constantly increasing, I kind of felt over time that it was less and less likely I was actually going to find one. And as far as C6s go, I never really paid too much attention to them, mostly because they were just out of my price range. I mean, they were all in the low to mid 30s, just for a narrow body. The Grand Sports are like $40,000, $45,000, which is just way too far above anything I wanted to spend on a car. But when this one came around, it was for sub 30, it had low mileage, it only has 35,000 miles on it. And the one thing that really stood out to me was that it had the Z51 option. And if you're not familiar with what that is, basically it just gives you a little bit heavier brakes, heavier sway bars, shock springs, and the most important thing, it gives you shorter gear ratios in the 6-speed transmission. Those gear ratios are actually borrowed from the C5 Z06, which I thought was pretty cool. And it was a little bit more than what I wanted to spend, but not by much. And I mean, at that point, you're getting a much better car. Every Corvette generation just drastically improves on the last. You know, the jump from the C4 to the C5 was huge. The C5 to the C6 was awesome. C6, C7, same thing and so forth. So just having a much newer car, a much better car. The fact that it was the LS3, I knew the resale was gonna be great compared to the LS2s. 6-speed transmission, Z51. You know, yeah, it was a little bit over what I wanted to spend, but I was just getting such a good car for the money that I really couldn't pass it up. Plus, it's got the target top. And that is the introduction to my new Corvette. Well, new to me. I'd really appreciate a like if you enjoyed the video, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see future content on my C6 Corvette. Take care, everyone. Oh man.